And I'm going to put us on to Facebook.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Kozub, and I am the Education Program Manager at the beautiful Birchfield Penny Art Center. One of my favorite jobs there is to spend time with the wonderful woman, excuse me, I'm stumbling over my words this evening. I'm so delighted that we're going to be spending time with a wonderful woman, the author, Dr. Peggy Brooks Bertram, and her incredible book, Dear Kamala, Women Write to the New Vice President. As I was trying to say, one of my favorite jobs at the Birchfield is welcoming authors to our book club and sharing them with all of you, our guests. Tonight, I'm also here with my colleague, Michaela Waros, and one of our outstanding docents, Lori Sear, who has agreed to facilitate tonight's discussion. Before we begin, though, I'd like to share a little bit about our book club. The book club started in 2011. It was a docent initiative designed at first to read the books that our own beloved namesake, Charles E. Birchfield, read. From then, we moved on to start reading books written by Western New York authors. It's completely in line and in keeping with the mission of the center, which is to celebrate the rich diversity and incredible talents of the Western New York community. I'm so happy that this book club is able to do that. Before we begin, I'm going to first turn over to Michaela, who will explain to you how the mechanics of this evening will work. So Michaela, if you'd be so kind.
Great. Hi, everyone. So like always, for this evening, please use our Q&A section at the bottom of the screen here to ask questions to Dr. Peggy Brooks Bertram, and I will intermittently ask your questions for you, and use the chat section if you would like to just chat with the group. This is also being recorded, and only the participants or panelists here are being recorded on screen. And this is also live on Facebook. So if you're watching from Facebook, use the comment section there. I'll be checking that too, and I will ask your questions. So.
Thank you, Michaela. I'm now going to turn things over to Lori Sear, who has the privilege of introducing Dr. Peggy Brooks Bertram. Lori, if you'd be so kind.
Yes, I'm very thrilled to introduce tonight's author, Dr. Peggy Brooks Bertram, who compiled and edited tonight's selection. She is also co-editor of another book you may remember called Go Tell Michelle, Letters to the First Lady, Michelle Obama. She is president of the Uncrowned Queens Institute, which is an online organization for research and documentation of the history of African-American men and women. She is a scholar, an educator, an activist, and a playwright. She has varied degrees, which include political science, public health, and American studies. She's written children's books, produced radio and television programs, and researched in the areas of education, public health, and African-American history. She developed a faith-based hospice center and worked as an advocate of the parents of public school children, and founded, among other things, an independent consultant firm of which she is the CEO. She's a member of the board of the directors of the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Society and the Kaleida Health Trustee Council. She is a recipient of numerous awards, which would take another 10 or 15 minutes to state, but one of them is in 2001, Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland awarded her the university's very first Distinguished Achievement Award for outstanding contributions to African-American history and culture. She is also the recipient of the Buffalo Urban League's 2002 Community Life Award. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Peggy Brooks Bertram. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am absolutely thrilled to be here tonight. I had no idea this book would come about. I was doing something else. And I wanted to share something with you about that something else and what that meant to me. And I've been working on, I guess, about 3 different projects at once. One of which has been the biography of the life of a Black woman from the Midwest who fell through the historical cracks. Ran into her maybe 25 years ago and couldn't get her out of my mind. My children grew up hearing her name all the time as I researched all sorts of records looking for her. But I thought what I'd like to do is talk about what I was doing when that historic moment occurred that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden became President and Vice President of the United States. And so this is what I wrote just recently. When this historic moment in the history of our country occurred, that is, an African-American Indian woman became Vice President of the United States, I was working on completing a biography of an African-American woman named Drusilla Dungy Houston. I stopped that work and started working on a strategy to document this historic event. With one call out on that newfangled social media, women and young girls around the world responded with their letters. Then I thought to myself, if Drusilla Dungy Houston were alive, what would she like you to know? So I imagined a letter that Drusilla would write to Kamala Harris in response to that historic occasion. And it would go like this. My name is Drusilla Dungy Houston. I was born in 1876 and was too young to recall my mother running from Black and white men who were members of the Readjustment Party when Hayes ran against Tilden for President of the United States. My father was Reverend John William Dungy, formerly enslaved for 27 years, and a Black Democrat. And that was when the Democrats were a party of whites who had just lost the Civil War. The Black Republicans saw Dad as a traitor because he begged for reconciliation with the white slaveholding Democrats. He thought that whites should be forgiven for their sins against humanity. Few Blacks agreed with him, and he had to be escorted from his home by white policemen with his young babies in arms. But I digress. Recently, your alma mater, Howard University, notified the world that they were dissolving the classics department, which had been part of the university since its founding in 1867, 9 years before I was born. This is the only and the last classics department of any historically Black college in the country. And as part of its prioritization efforts, it will close this historic department. Cornel West, noted philosopher and classicist, described that move as a spiritual catastrophe. Black women classicists like myself abhor that move. It was our reliance on the classics which solidified the critical understanding of the role of ancient Black Cushites and their connection to the ancient Greeks and Romans and others in the ancient Mediterranean Levant. These people are identified in the Old Testament of the Holy Bible. Black female classicists like myself, including Phyllis Wheatley, Anna Julia Cooper, Pauline Hopkins, and Toni Morrison, even in death, will see that their work and their efforts to continue educating Black and white students about the classic Black civilizations that gave rise to Rome, Greece, and other Aegean civilizations would now have to scavenge among disparate departments in the university to find a course in Greek, Latin, rhetoric, and logic. From my grave, dear Kamala, I believe this is unacceptable and represents a blatant attack on the history of Black people and their contributions to world civilizations. I ask that you remember your own training at the classics at Howard, and that you write a letter to the current President Andrew Johnson, reminding him of the importance of the classics to the study of world history and the place of Africans in that history. Remember that the loss of a Department of Classics at Howard is academia's continual campaign to disregard or neglect the classics is a sign of spiritual decay, moral decline, and a deep intellectual narrowness running amok in American culture. Let me point out that Martin Luther King cited Socrates not once, but 3 times in his famed letter from the Birmingham jail. Turning your back on the classics is rejecting the learning that inspired and helped mold such Black leaders as Frederick Douglass and Dr. Martin Luther King, W.E.B.B. Du Bois, Carter G. Woodson, and historians like myself. Congratulations on your successful win, and much success as you and President Biden face the awesome challenges of this new world before us. Stay well, stay focused, and stay strong. We got your back. Sempre Fidelis. That is a letter that Drusilla Dungy Houston would have written had she been alive to see such an auspicious occasion. So with that, let me begin to show you a few pictures on the, oh my goodness, on my PowerPoint. And so tell me how I get to it again.
All right, so it's already up and shared with our group. So you just have to click through your slides.
Okay. This young woman here, first let me just say, in August, not about August 18th, after we knew that they had won, I wanted to put out a call for young women all over the world, not just white, not just Black, but young women all over the world to write a letter to Kamala Harris, just taking note of this historic occasion. And what I found and what I learned was absolutely incredible. There were young Black women who were expatriates who left the United States years ago and never came back and were never coming back. But they were still working for the Democratic Party and organizing. And this beautiful young woman, Adrienne George, was in Sweden. And I met her online. But I had met her before when I did a book called Go Tell Michelle. And I think she was a contributor at that time. People who responded all over the world. These are African women out of Africa, judges, people in the politics, people who were writers, people who were publishers, all over, they responded. Originally, we called the whole project the Harris Letter Project. And I added the piece, put the wind beneath her wings, as only women could do. And the campaign was powered by women showing support for Harris. And they came from all over. And here in Buffalo, we had so many people who responded. And the Buffalo and Every County Library invited us to do a discussion of this book as well. And hundreds of people. And I mean, it was just incredible the number of people who got into the chat rooms, raised questions, and what have you. It was just an extraordinary. And there were the young people, the children who responded. This is a little Girl Scout from Palo Alto, California. And I loved so much what they said. And here we took little snippets from what they wrote. And in this case, Eleanor says, I also think that America needs to work on driving less and stopping the spread of pollution. Maybe we could have a holiday where people try to stop using gasoline. And the global warming is getting more dangerous for polar bears and Arctic animals. And others of the young girls like this asked that the president go back to the Paris Accords and let's see what we can do on that. I thought that was brilliant. And it was a whole troop of these young girls, 15 of them. And there are some of them holding their books. And it was quite something reading their letters and then talking to them and having them chime in on the Zoom sessions and meeting them. It was quite extraordinary. So it wasn't just a one-way communication. People were talking to me day and night, calling me and phoning me like this dog over here. And this was, and so this was quite exciting. And then I noticed that it wasn't just getting people to write a letter. You were like living with them, talking to them every day, talking to them every night. People were emailing me all hours of the night. My computer was pinging all hours of the night, all during the day. And people were, Jennifer, my colleague, and I, we recognized that we needed to talk even more to them. For example, people wrote to me using emojis. I'm not a favor of emojis. So I wrote an op-ed called "Emojis Are Not Words. We Want Letters from You." And a big, on-site organization called Blavity News picked up my op-ed. And there we were. Oh my goodness. All over the country, people were taking a look at what we were saying about the Dear Kamala. And then the Buffalo women chimed in. It was like 20 women from Buffalo who also contributed a letter. They were storytellers, they were musicians, they were school teachers, they were in the theatrical arts, and it was wonderful. And they joined, and they were some of my most major support, in this project of writing the letters. And there I am with the, I think maybe with the library. But I did a graph of some of what we were dealing with or who we were dealing with. And we were looking at the generations who participated. All across the board, women participated. We had the silent generation, the boomers, Generation X, the millennials, the Generation Z, and we found out very interesting things. And when you read the book, you see that women and young people took an opportunity to talk about those things that were important for them. And we realized that we started the book with a letter from 12 or 13 Black women's organizations that were historic. And we got them to write a letter, and they talked about the legacies of these older Black women's organizations. And then I noticed that when I was getting these letters in, we needed to do some more advertising because we wanted to see what would a Generation Z say to these legacy organizations. And so when you read the book, you'll see the differences between the kinds of things that an older generation would write about and that a younger generation would write about. So, and then when we talk about where did these people come from, so we did a data review of the contributors and the countries of origin, Africa, and in Africa, Nigeria, the Ivory Coast, the island of Madagascar. And accidentally, I ran into somebody that I had known for a long time who was now living in Madagascar. And I said, oh my goodness, you have to contribute a letter from the tip of Africa. Then there was South Africa and Nepal and numerous places in Europe and Jamaica, Sweden, Canada, the USA, Haiti, Germany, India, France, Philippines, Norway, all of them crossing those generations and talking about the same thing. It was really quite extraordinary. And who were they? What did they do? They were poets, award-winning authors, playwrights, lawyers, educators, historians, politicians, program directors, business owners, college professors, technology, dancers, comedians, and sorority members, just like Kamala Harris, speaking all kinds of languages, English, French, German, Hindi, Somali, Spanish. And I must tell you, the most exciting thing was when one woman from India, namely Nepal, wrote me a letter, and we managed to start talking via Facebook and introduced me to her entire family. And it was like the whole community got involved, and they were all sending me messages on Messenger and Facebook. And it was really just absolutely wonderful. Every time there was they dressed up babies and put the babies on Facebook to tell Peggy Bertram hello. And so the worlds were colliding and they were coming together ever so gently as everybody was, putting their ideas together around one thing, and that was Kamala Harris. And the issues that they had of concern was just were numerous. One was childcare, protection of abandoned children, elder care, medical care, Obamacare, educational loans, the LGBT community, their issues, gender, elderly care, and Alzheimer's. And I have to stop and tell you about this issue of Alzheimer's. One of the women from Buffalo is on the board of directors of the Alzheimer's Association in Western New York. And she called me up one day and she said, Peggy, I don't know what to write about. I'm working with Alzheimer's and I really want to contribute a letter, but I don't know what to say. Pardon me. And I said, well, write about Alzheimer's. We all have issues with that, either for ourselves or taking care of someone who did have this condition. Talk about that. And so she said, okay. And then she called again and she said, I said, tell me something about your father. And she says, well, he was a musician. I think he played a clarinet. He loved his clarinet. She says, and then all of a sudden he stopped. So I said, well, write your letter and call it The Day the Music Stopped. And that's when Sandy started to write. And it's a beautiful letter. And then there were issues of child abuse, voter suppression, the future of the historically Black colleges and universities, education, and sex trafficking. And then a wall of Black women's organizations, the National Council of Negro Women contacted me, and they contributed a letter with a membership of well over 3 or 4 million women around the world. Alpha Kappa Alpha, the sorority of the vice president, Delta Sigma Theta, Sigma Gamma Rho, Zeta Phi Zeta sorority, the National Council, the Links Incorporated, the Links Foundation, the National Foundation of 100 Black Women, Jack and Jill of America, the Girlfriends, Top Ladies of Distinction Incorporated, and the Black Women's Roundtable. I didn't even know so many of them existed, but it was extraordinary to support us and to write these letters just very, very quickly, because the turnaround time was less than 30 days. There were other Black women's organizations, such as the Black Women's Agenda, the Uncrowned Queens Institute, of which I'm president, and the National Association of Black Storytellers. And this group really rose to the occasion and contacted women all over the country who were Black storytellers. And they lifted this book up with their stories, with their rhymes, and our own Sharon Holly, who wrote a jump rope rhyme. And all of us as girls remember jumping rope. And so she wrote one jump rope rhyme for Kamala Harris. And I'm still working on meeting with the Black storytellers. For in a couple of months, we have an international program around this book. And so it's been an incredible activity in that it wasn't just asking people to write a letter. But let me give you some of the backdrop of it. What happens? It's not just that you write a letter and you send it in. Somebody has to read it. Somebody has to edit it. Somebody has to make arrangements to say, where am I going to find a publisher? What am I going to do? So I go back to a person I knew best, a publisher, Gary Dunham, with Indiana University Press. But when I first met him, he was with State University in New York, and he did Go Tell Michelle. I called him up from my desk at UB and didn't know him and said, listen, we got a book, it's going to be exciting, and I can get you a book in 34 days. And he said, no, you can't do that. I said, yes, I can. Just work with us. So my colleague, Barbara Nevergold, and I, it was stunning the times we have. Just, you can't say enough about that, putting together that book. But that was a very different book because we didn't have Facebook. We didn't have Instagram. We didn't have FaceTime. We didn't have anything. And I almost don't remember how that all came together, except that we were sitting at our computers day and night, reading emails from people all over the world. And with this book, you could see people, you could see them in their kitchens. You could talk to them about what you needed from them anytime, day or night. And they would be talking to you and they'd say, hey, Ma, I got Dr. Bertram on the line. Come on in. What would you like to say? It was an incredible, enriching experience for me and for my friends and for my family. Let me see what else we have. And then I have to be very candid. Before I started this project, I had done 2 other projects, but nothing like this. The first was Go Tell Michelle. And we even had a play that was produced called Go Tell Michelle. And the first place that we presented it was in Baltimore, Maryland at the Copeland State College. And we presented it on stage with Karima Amin as a third party with us. And the second time we were invited to come to California because it was going to be a professional theater. It was going to put it on and it was going to make its debut there. It was incredible flying to California on the strength of this book from Michelle Obama. So I remembered that when here, my friend Jennifer Parker taught me how to address all of these things. She taught me how to do videos and to save them and send them out, how to maneuver Facebook, how to do LinkedIn and Twitter and all. I knew none of that. Overnight, Jennifer, in her very quiet voice, what I'll never forget, said, now, Peggy, don't you worry about a thing. I'm going to teach you how to do that. So just remember, I told you first you do this, second you do that, and boom, I was using Twitter, LinkedIn, Messenger, all of the social media platforms. And Jennifer was right there, just Jennifer Jackson, Parker Jackson. Each morning I would get up, Jennifer said, you want to let the world know that you're still percolating, Peggy. You need to do a video every morning. And I thought, oh no, not more technology. So here's me when I did all kinds of dressing up, you know, and was talking about issues that was affecting all of us. And then when the Indian women came on board, I decided to dress up in raw Indian silk. And it was a whole bunch of these, and these all went online. It was just incredible. And it just showed you that the work, there was an incredible amount of work to be done. And we did that. So all around the world in 30 days, we had these women contacting, the women out of Canada, for example, saying, oh, this is wonderful. We're so happy to be involved. And everyone, and people in the United States from California to Mississippi. And no, we didn't get anybody from Brazil, but we did get 11 people out of Africa. And it was also in Italy, France, England, and other places. This was an incredible experience. The press that actually wound up publishing the book was Indiana University Press. The man I had dealt with, Gary Dunham, had moved on to Indiana University Press. So I called him up. I said, Gary, it's me again. I got a book for you, Kamala Harris. Dear Kamala, you want to go for it? Yes, let's go for it. And that's what we did. And I learned so many things this time around that I hadn't known before, especially because the technology wasn't there. And it changed all of us. Here's an Indian educator, Akana Risal Pokarel, the first person from India who responded. And it was thrilling. And she just couldn't believe that she would have a chance to say something. And she, I believe, lived in a village that was next door to the village that Kamala's mother lived in. And so we talked, and we still talk. And her husband sends messages, and it just really was a wonderful thing, what this book did with the world, talking to one another. And this is our homegirl, Sharon Holly, who wrote the rhyme. And Sharon is well known for her children's stories and her drumming, and she belongs to a drumming group as well. So in conclusion, I say, if you want to be memorable, write a letter. And when I want to end with this. What people have asked me, first of all, how are we for time?
You're doing great.
You're doing great.
Okay, great. I want to end with this, with the beginning of the book. I wrote an introduction. I didn't actually write a letter, but I wrote an introduction because I wanted to tell people about the power of a letter, and the power, especially of a letter that you write in your own hand without an emoji, that letters do something to you. And my mother was a letter writer, and so I loved writing letters. So let me share this letter with you, which is the form of an introduction. A number of people have asked, why did you choose a letter writing campaign asking women to support Kamala Harris? My first reaction was to call on what I knew about the gift of letter writing as a power for Black women and how they wrote letters during some of the most challenging times in their lives. They wrote during their happy times and during slavery, emancipation, and Reconstruction. And when the first Black man ran for president of the United States, thereby launching a Black woman into the first ladyship of the country, I called for letters resulting in a book of letters from Michelle Obama. In 2012, I again called for a book of letters to support the first Black woman superintendent of Buffalo Public Schools. However, it came to me during the early morning hours when memories about the first letter I ever wrote as a child came flooding back. That letter was written in support of a friend. I remembered putting a stamp on the envelope and nervously dropping it in the old blue United States Postal Service mailbox on the corner of Broadway and Barnes Streets in Baltimore, Maryland. Looking back, I can describe this letter written at 11 years of age as an intervention. And that letter made its way to Harlem, New York. I was 11 or 12 when I wrote that letter. And it was on behalf of a new friend of mine who was spending the summer in Baltimore with her Aunt Mary, who lived 3 doors down from me. Like my family, they also lived in a rundown alley house, now known as one of the famous row houses of Baltimore, still standing after the migrant Irish moved away, leaving the wreckage of the East Baltimore row house of the early 1900s, now known as the gentrified alley house. But I digress. I only remember Elaine's first name, but I remember her face and that of her mother, who lost the day of work to come to Baltimore because of my letter. When Elaine's mother knocked on my door at 1605 Bond Street, my mother answered. Elaine's mother thought my mother had written the letter, and she asked my mother to tell her what it meant. My mother recognized my handwriting and called me inside. I saw the two of them talking about my letter, spread out on the kitchen table. Oh, it was a long letter, but I never recalled it being so long. I was mortified. Peggy, my mother said, why did you write this? I explained sheepishly. I thought Elaine wasn't safe in the house, so I wrote the letter to her mother. My mother said, but it wasn't your business. I responded, but I thought it was my business. And I thought Elaine's mother should know that this could also happen to Elaine. Elaine's mother asked, did Elaine know that you had written this letter? Yes, I replied. She was afraid of what I had written, but she was also afraid of Alfonso. And she went to the mailbox with me. We thought no more about it. That very night, Elaine left for Harlem with her mother, and I never saw her again. 2 weeks later, Elaine's Aunt Mary was beaten to death with a lead pipe by Mary's husband, Alfonso. That's when I started to believe in the power of letter writing. Mary was lost, but Elaine was in Harlem. And my mother used to tell stories through her little letters that she would write and leave on stick them in between the frame, the wooden frame and the mirror. And I remember once that she used to say, when you pass by a board with upturned nails or a broken bottle or two, do you pause for a moment to make it safe for the one who comes after you? You know, life could be beautiful only if we would look out for the others too. For the one you love could be the one who comes after you. Thank you very much. That's it, folks.
Right.
And
Lori,
so
if you, we have questions for Lori and then from our participants too. So whenever you're ready, Lori.
Oh, okay. She has to unmute.
She's muting. Laura, you need to unmute.
Sorry. I was interested in the format of the book, the letter writing format, because I remember also writing a lot of letters in my youth and before PCs and cell phones and texting. And it's really kind of a lost art in a lot of ways because of the technology. Although it sounds like you use a lot of technology to get your information anyway for the book. In the book, I found there were common themes like hope and the fact that Kamala Harris reflected many of the letter writers, themes of her standing on the shoulders of her predecessors, people like Harriet Tubman and Shirley Chisholm. Younger letter writers often reflected their dreams. Were there any other themes that struck you when you were editing the book?
One of the major themes that struck me was that the chasm between the legacy Black women and the legacy organizations and today's LGBT groups, that they felt when we talked with them, a couple of things they did. They had me do a podcast. I asked them to write letters. I said, listen, your voices need to be heard, write letters. The organizers of this huge group said, no, they wouldn't write letters, but they invited me to come and speak to see what I had to say. And so there was a big chasm in that way. We didn't hear from them. One or two did write, you know, and they wrote reluctantly. And this one large group that I spoke with said, felt somehow that they would be betrayed if they wrote how they really felt about things. And they felt that they didn't know Kamala Harris and that they didn't trust her the way that we all seemed like we did. And they thought that this was such a different world, and they needed to know that anybody who was taking a powerful leadership position like she was, that they needed to know that she understood their issues, that she understood the things that kept them up at night, that she understood their feeling of lack of safety in the streets, the feeling that they could work very hard and get themselves at the top of the pile, only to be pulled down by people who didn't understand what it meant to be an LGBT person or trans in any way. And it was a new language for me. I didn't understand it. I didn't know it. You know, I heard it and I could read about it, but I didn't really know it. And so that's when they said, you can come on our podcast. And one of the issues that somebody had raised was, look, you know, you can be in love with Kamala all you want to, but we still hold back. And it wasn't just this group, it was others as well, who said, in the Black community, who said, she's a light-skinned Black woman, she has long straight hair, she looks somewhat white, and she's Indian in her background. And, you know, we're kind of squeaky on that. And that's when I did the video saying, I don't care whether she's Black, Indian, Native American, she's can be anything except orange. And so they identified with that. But that was some very difficult stuff that I don't think we cut through at all. I think that it bears looking at very closely, but at least I got to scratch the surface. But that really made my job harder, is learning how to do videos, putting them together, writing the script for it, making sure I knew what I was talking about. It was really quite something. You know, so that was one of the things that came up that really stood out with me.
It's very interesting. And it's from your PowerPoint presentation, it's very apparent that this putting together this book was all consuming for you. Yeah. And I'd like to there's two chapters. One I thought was a very powerful statement. It's chapter 41, page 63 for anyone that has the book in front of them. And the last line, I was born Black and I will die Black. I just don't want to die because I am Black. Oh, and yeah. I thought, considering all that went on during the past summer, it was just so very timely.
It was very timely, so much so. And I remember when I looked at that again, as I go over these and I read over them, I said, oh my goodness, I missed that. I didn't see that, you know, because people were so, you know, they were so intense in their observations about things, and some of which I just didn't see. But when I looked at this, I thought, wow, I just don't want to die because I am Black. And it speaks to me, because I must tell you that every time I hear of somebody that just wantonly walks up to somebody in a supermarket and kills them, I think about that. Do you? I'm going shopping. I just want to pick up a watermelon, fried chicken even, and candies and cookies, but somebody might shoot me. And that's when when I read that, I thought about that. And we have episodes of that occurring every day. Yeah, these writers really got down. And the woman who wrote the foreword had written a poem for the Go Tell Michelle book for me. So she said she was happy to do that. But what I loved about what she did was that woman can write. And the poem that she wrote was called We in Anticipation of You. And she walked us all the way through from Harriet Tubman to Toni Morrison in a brilliant discussion of, you know, we came over on the slave ships, we lived our lives in the plantations, we lived through Jim Crow, we went through this and we went through that, but we did all of this just in anticipation of you. We just knew it was going to happen. So these people, writers and people writing letters and forced to sit down and think through on a subject. This is really powerful stuff. Mm-hmm. And these were white and Black women. And that's what I was really pleased with. The last time I asked only Black women to write. And I think that women overall are so powerful and so smart about what they want to say and what the issues are, that we all have to do that together. And so I know, you know, I made the right move when I said, you know, I could listen to Black children, I could listen to Asian children, I could listen to white children, and I could listen to Black and white women. And that was very powerful. And my friend Kate Larson, who wrote the book Harriet Tubman, and who also reviewed the current book that I'm finishing on Drusilla Dungy Houston. Kate talking about knowing Harriet Tubman inside and outside and understanding, how complex all of this is. Her comments were very, very powerful for me. And, so it continues to move me very deeply, what people said and how they expressed it.
There was one other chapter that I wanted to reference, and then we can open this up to questions from the rest of the participants. Chapter 94, that's page 147. And this writer, it was almost like a mantra that you would use during terrible events in her life. And it was hold your breath, now breathe.
What page is this?
It's 147. And she repeats that mantra throughout her letter.
It's chapter 94.
Yes, it's
Yes.
Dr. Glory Van Scott.
Yes, yes. Just hold your breath. Oh, you're Black like me, and you're moving your purse just like white people. And here's, Black people, all these sentences just reminding us of who we are and how separated we've become. And I read that first letter. I wonder if anybody would comment on my opening letter, imagining what would first of all, for 2 decades, I've been following the life of Drusilla Dungy Houston, an extraordinary woman. And to put that aside and jump onto this was very difficult for me. And that is why I wanted to read what I imagined a letter would look like if she had written it from the grave. What would she have said? And she would have jumped on one of the headiest issues that we're dealing with today, and that is the abandonment of curriculum in the public schools that talks about how we got to where we are. And that unless children understand that, we will never have peace with ourselves, not ever. And I think that, and I couldn't resist, calling on Drusilla Dungy Houston again, because I don't know if many of you do, extensive writing, but when you write like that and you reach into the lives and the souls and you touch the things that the people you're writing about touched, even though they were born in 1876, you touch their books, you can run your fingers over their handwriting. You are investing your time and your energy and some of your soul in reviving the wishes and the hopes of a person who's no longer with us. And so for me to put that aside, and when I'm almost finished, and to jump into this book, it was hard. So I needed to bring her to life again, saying, Drusilla, what would you say to Kamala Harris? And she would fall right into an issue that no one believed she was involved in, and that was the study of the classics of African Americans, African people at the dawn of civilization. I also know that we have a lot of work to do. Those of us who are in our age groups, there's a lot of things we don't know, but there's a lot more that we do know. And that I think writing like this, getting young people and older people to write and then having the world take a look at it is very powerful. And each day, and you're right, and each day I feel the weight of it, because it was so much. And people call you up and what'd you think? What'd you think of what I wrote? Oh, it's wonderful. What do you feel about it? So they weren't just, I lived with these people, you just live with them while they're writing. They don't just send you a piece of paper or an email and you're done. They call you and they talk to you. And, and you hear the stories of their family, like Sandy's father, the day the music stopped. And it was an exquisite experience, and would I do it again? I think so, but it was not easy. Fortunately, the book is selling all over the world. I was just on a Zoom conference and somebody says, I got the book when I was in Japan last week. And I thought, wow, really just, it's been really great. And I love the fact that I got some of these ideas when I was working at UB and the University of Buffalo with the Uncrowned Queens Institute was so beautiful to Barbara Nevergold and I. And these ideas of mine, they grew up sitting in an office at Allen Hall. And it was only by the grace of President John Simpson and then the latest, president that gave us, support, monetary support and spatial support and technology support, back in 2008.
Wow. Well, I see there's 5 questions in the Q&A, so I'll let.
Yeah. So our first one's from Jasira. She asks, was letter writing an important part of your early life growing up?
Yeah. And my mother was the poet and the letter writer. She only had a 6th grade education. My father had no education. And when he got mad with my mother, he used to say, you think you're so important because you have all of that education. That's what he would say. But my mother wrote letters because she always wrote notes to us. If there was something sensitive that she wanted to talk about, she would put it in a little note to us and stick it in between the glass and the mirror frame. And that's how you got to know stuff, by reading like that.
And Jasira's second question is, did you ever hear anything back from Kamala or even Michelle about your books?
As we would say, honey child, that's a whole nother story. Because what happens is these people have concentric circles of people around them. You can't get to them. Anything that you send in the mail is X-rayed, CAT scanned, MRI, and everything to check for dangers. And we never heard from Michelle Obama, ever. And I remember I was at a whistle stop campaign trail on the trail with Obama, and I had the book in my hand and said, oh, please, President Obama, please give this to your wife, please. I was like, right there. And the civil service, and I said, I can throw it to you. And the civil service guy with him said, the Secret Service guy with him said, don't even try it. I said, okay. So we sent book after book after book. And there was a person who was a special assistant, supposedly, to Michelle Obama, an Indian woman, for example. And I said, look, what's happening with these books? I think there were like 10 or 12 of them. And she said she had put them on desks, that Michelle Obama had to walk past, had to look down. There was no way she couldn't see it. And yet she never got it. And then I was furious with that. How could that happen? How could that happen? When Essence magazine picked up the story, we thought that, okay, we know she read that. We know people that was associated with her knew she read it. Nothing. And then when it looked like we really would get recognition nationally, we were ready to roll. CNN, Kira Chetri had decided, yes, they wanted to interview us. Oh, we were on cloud 9. We were talking to her and the big CNN logo was up. We were ready to blast off. And just as we got ready to answer the question, how did you get started with this book? Newsflash, interruption. Sully Sullenberger had landed his plane in the New York Harbor. Oh, God. Sorry, ladies. I thought, no. Oh, no. This can't be happening to us. That's what happened. But 155 lives were saved. And as we counted them as they walked out onto the wings of the plane that was submerged in the harbor, I thought, you can't cut a break anywhere here. This is crazy. But we did travel all over the country. State University of New York picked up the travel, and we traveled from one end of this country to the other. It was absolutely awesome. This way we traveled all over the world and we never left their offices, you know? So it was really quite different. The Kamala Harris, on the other hand, is proving to be equally as elusive. We had really some top drawer assistants. We had congressmen, senators that we knew of and that we talked to and said, we're going to hand this book right to Kamala and say, this is from people who want you to know this and that they're writing for you, da, 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 da. It didn't work. It just didn't work. So we're still hoping that we're going to do another campaign of saying, look, here's this book. It was for you. And if for no other reason, answer those Girl Scouts in the troop in California who wrote to you. Don't disappoint the children. They're writing to you. And their letters are very pertinent now. Why? Because they're in the fire zone. The West is on the fire and they're talking to you about climate change. Oh, please, write a letter to these kids. We contacted everybody that could possibly be in touch. Her press person, a friend of the press person, a friend of the friend of the friend of the press person, the senators, the congressmen, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, everybody. And so many people say, oh, I was just at a party last week with Kamala. Really? Did you tell her about this book? Oh my God, I didn't have it with me. How could you leave home without this book? Right? It was, and it still is crazy. So people think that, oh, she'll love this. This is beautiful. She'll enjoy this. Yeah, but you still can't figure out how to get it to her. And our Congressman Higgins, we sent 2 copies. He said, please. He says, walking right in there and handing it to her. 5 weeks later, you call up and said, okay, what happened? Haven't been able to break through. What on earth do you have to do? You know, like you really want to, I just want to run by the office and throw a book in the office and keep moving. You know, of course you'd be arrested for assault, but it's, even in spite of all of that, it's something that people should know. It's not easy. It is not easy to get responded to. And you just don't know who do other people know that they are able. And as a matter of fact, one of the people who wrote a letter representing all of these Black women's organizations, millions of women, she called me up at midnight and said, Peggy, this is a beautiful idea. We want to sign on with all these organizations. I said, fantastic. She says, I don't want to talk long because I got a meeting with Oprah before I do close up for the night. Who? Oprah Winfrey. Oh my goodness. And what I've noticed is that anybody who knows Oprah does not offer to take any information to her. They have to sign a contract that they won't do that. And, you know, that's what somebody said to me years ago. Oh, no. I said, you were on the Oprah show. Tell me how you could. No, I can't tell you that. And they don't. I don't know. I'd like to see what that contract looks like. Mm-hmm. But it's not easy to get a book in.
We have a question from Arlette Miller-Smith. She
says,
she says, please talk a bit about the weightiness of the issues and concerns of young women. Amari and Destiny from Rochester focus on political issues related to the double pandemic, school funding, police reform, no makeup, fashion, or dating. What do other Gen Z writers focus on in their letters?
Oh, Arlette, how could you? Arlette wrote the foreword. And we went back and forth and we talked early on, and we went through the whole book, all the letters, and looked at, and I drew up all the issues and whatever, and I don't remember all of them. But if anything stood out with me the most, Arlette, because you were the one that referred me to Shanna, who took a great deal of time to talk to us about the LGBTQ plus issues and what these young women and men were facing. And she wrote a very sound, cogent letter, explaining that. And I thank you so much for that. And those issues are so deep because they talk about being a transgender. And people in my generation are saying, what is that? Why are you doing that? How do you explain that? And these young people are not in tune with us, and we're not in tune with them. And how do we get in tune? And your friend Shannon really helped us to understand that there is a void. There's a very deep void. And we know that transgender people, for example, don't feel safe in the streets. And in many ways, maybe they shouldn't, because it's not nice out there.
Yeah.
As a Black person, I don't feel safe in the streets. I never had that problem before, but I don't recall all of the things, but I do recall, I can do this. My own daughter, daughters do interesting things with mothers. I don't know if any of you know that, but my own daughter.
I liked your daughter's letter a great deal.
Yeah, I want to read that because here it is. If you think you can make your children do what you want them to do, you are mistaken. She says, I'm writing you this letter as part of the Harris Letters Project because my mother asked me to. And she is the founder of this project. I've hesitated because I don't know what to say. I'm what you might call an Afro-pessimist. I have little faith in electoral politics and view them as with a high degree of skepticism. The United States is still a white settler and patriarchal colonialist project. If this weren't still the case, things would look very different than they do today. And so I regard anyone with ambitions of power within this colonialist project with a high degree of suspicion. That includes you and Joe Biden. But my mother started this project and asked me to write a letter because she believes in something that I might not when it comes to politics, and because she believes in the power of symbolism. And this, she isn't wrong. Symbols are powerful. This entire nation is built on symbols. We are fighting now over symbols, symbolic power that sometimes becomes real power. It means something that a Black woman is vice president of this country. It means something that any woman could be vice president of this country. I look around the world and see the women are in the top positions of many countries as presidents and chancellors and prime ministers. And yet here, in seemingly the most advanced country in the world, this hasn't happened. It's simple. We are not the most advanced country in the world. We are not at the forefront. The pandemic has exposed what most of us already knew, that our symbols of freedom, equality, and achievement are fictions. Whatever truths they might have held are steadily eroding. And perhaps this is where you come in, to prove whether or not we can actually advance past a threshold imposed by a backward patriarchy grasping at irrelevant vestiges of power. I would not look to you or to Biden to somehow change this world merely by being in power. That's far too much, and you already have so many forces arrayed against you. What I would hope is that in the vice presidency, you do what this current administration cannot, that you focus on doing the least amount of harm to those who are already being harmed the most. That you not only recommit to, but advance the social safety nets that are crucial for this country and that have proven indispensable in other countries around the globe. And that you push for this country to rejoin the world community on crucial issues like climate change and human security. I am happy that you are now Vice President, and believe me, I hope with all my remaining hope that you know that so many are rooting for you and that it may be the most politically meaningful event to occur in their lifetimes. Lillian was recognized by the New Yorker magazine for the best book of the year in poetry. She didn't get it, but she was on a list of people who were nominated, which is really extraordinary. And she took time from that to write this for me. And I agree with her. We have cause for pessimism because there's so much arrayed against us, especially you as a Black woman. So glad you called out that letter. Any other questions?
Lori, do you have any more questions?
I do not.
Okay. Well, if there's anyone else in the Q&A that would like to ask questions, do so now. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Mary.
Well, before we go, I just want to say that I think of all the letters, I loved your daughter's the most. I thought it just rang so true. And so many of the letters were written as poems. Hers was just poetic.
Yeah.
I thought it was maybe my favorite. And also, you pointed this out before, but I think that you couldn't help but notice and heard a little bit when you read the young girls' letters, who always, each of them talked about global warming, the environment, caring for the earth, what will they have left for them when they're our age. And I hope she does get a hold of that book and that she does respond to those girls, because I agree with you. They deserve an answer.
They deserve an answer. It's okay if you don't respond to me. I'm going to be okay. And, but I just think it would be breathtaking. And the LA Times did a sweeping story on these young girls. It was brilliant. You know, that's where I got the photo from, nice. Holding up the book.
That's nice.
But there was one thing I have to share with you, the things that we do. There was one mother in the of a child who was in the troop, and after they had all the troop leader worked like holy get out to get the letters ready and to meet the deadline. And one girl's mother said she didn't want her to send in her letter because she thought the daughter should have worked harder on it, and therefore she didn't want to submit it. And I said, please put me in touch with her mother. You know, let's not do this. This is a whole troop that's going to have a letter. And this one girl in that troop won't have a letter? Oh my God, don't do that. You'll never live that down.
No,
don't do that.
Horrible.
Oh, and she wouldn't let her send it in. And
that's heartbreaking.
That was heartbreaking for me.
That is heartbreaking.
How could you do that? And then to see all of these little kids holding their book up with their letter in it, and one other girl not being there, you know, you go, what are people thinking about? You know, so you were right when you talked about this was a heavy lift this time around, because you see people and you're talking to them, and they call you and they talk to you, you know. So that was the one thing that made it a heavy lift, you know, but I loved every moment of it, and I would do it again, because now I have the internet.
Well, we have you back again. So thank you so much, Dr. Peggy Brooks Bertram. I know I'm messing up that last name, forgive me. Bertram, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's really been a wonderful evening. I loved your book. I encourage everyone to read the book. Please buy it at our local bookstores. We want to support our local bookstores. I know they carry it.
Especially Talking Leaves
especially Talking Leaves.
And Sharon Holly's bookstore, Zawadi bookstores, Zawadi. Yes, let's
Thank you
support
for
those
mentioning that.
Yes, so
Yes.
we support those independents, because they're just, I know both of them very well. They're just great people. But again, thank you so much for helping me.
Sure. And thank you to all of our panelists, Michaela and Lori. Thank you for making this evening possible. And please join us again for another book club. The next one is August 5th. We'll be featuring Ed Parks and discussing his award-winning first novel, Personal Days. Ed is a very interesting man with an incredible history and career before him and preceding this book. So please join us and get to know him a little bit. Please join us for our second Friday since the pandemic, next week, Friday. It will be live and Michaela and I will be outside making art. So please come and join us. We'd love to see you there. And come visit us at the center. It's open. There's lots of wonderful art to see. And everyone, thank you again and have a great 4th of July. So thank you and good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.